Hi, welcome to Philly Jazz Talks About. And what we're talking about tonight is someone very special, saxophonist Sam Reed. I'm Suzanne Cloud, project director of the Philadelphia Jazz Legacy Project. And this evening, we're going to be talking to two of Sam's very good friends, drummer, educator, and Philly icon, Albert Tootie Heath, and pianist, producer, and composer-songwriter, Alfie Pollitt, both good friends of the man and musician that we'll talk about tonight. But before we do that, it's important to know, and that you know, that these jazz talks are brought to you by the Philadelphia Jazz Legacy Project. We're an organization whose mission is to establish a permanent jazz archive for Philadelphia area jazz artists and the community at large through recordings, video interviews, manuscripts, and material culture like photographs, programs, posters, anything that relates to Philly jazz and its history. You can also get more information on our website at phillyjazzhistory.org. I'd also like to thank the Philadelphia Cultural Fund for sponsoring these talks. Without their help, these programs would not be possible. I also want to thank the people who supported us last month and have been supporting us with their donations. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. We really do. And it means a lot. To get a reminder of all our events and other Philly Jazz Legacy work that we're doing, sign up for our newsletter. Please go to our Philly website, at phillyjazzhistory.org. You can immediately sign up for the newsletter and find out what kind of work that we're doing, who we're spotlighting, that sort of thing. And it's all I can tell you, it's definitely interesting. Now, to introduce tonight's guest, we are so thrilled to welcome Albert Tootie Heath. He's the youngest of the three Heath brothers, a consummate jazz drummer, and has playing with seemingly everyone from John Coltrane to Ethan Iverson, and performing on more than 100 recordings. Self-taught, he's also got musical training from his father, a clarinetist in one of Philadelphia's many black marching bands, and from his older brothers, Percy and Jimmy, who were already establishing themselves in the jazz world. Still in high school, Heath was asked to accompany Thelonious Monk on the drums during Monk's engagement at Philadelphia's Blue Note Club on Ridge Avenue. By 1957, Tootie was in New York, where he had a recording debut with the legendary John Coltrane on his album Coltrane, and later played on Coltrane's Lush Life. In 1958, Heath was the drummer for Nina Simone's first album, Little Girl Blue. Heath quickly became a sought-after musician, playing with J.J. Johnson from 1958 until 1960, and then played and recorded with jazz greats in the United States and all around the world, including Cannonball Adderley, Art Farmer, Benny Golson, another Philadelphian, Dexter Gordon, Johnny Griffin, Clifford Jordan, as well as playing in Herbie Hancock's band from 1965 to 1970. In 1975, he joined his brothers and pianist Stanley Cowell to form the Heath Brothers, a group that remained active until the passing of Percy Heath, his older brother, in 2005. During the 1990s, he was a drummer in the Modern Jazz Quartet, too. I mean, I could really go on all night. But let's just sum up Tootie's little short bio here to say he was named by the NEA as a jazz master in 2021. And I welcome Albert Tootie Heath. Next tonight is Alfie Pollitt. Alfie Pollitt is a pianist, composer, producer, and songwriter. He's been studying and playing music since receiving his first piano lessons at the age of 3. He's a native of Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. And since the time he was very small, he was surrounded by all types of music by his parents, who were both very well-respected members of the Philadelphia music community. His major influences include John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, Horace Silver, and Jimmy Smith. These and other musical greats helped to shape Alfie's diverse playing style. In addition to leading his own ensembles, Alfie has performed with a broad spectrum of prominent jazz and R&B artists, including Barbara Mason, Donald Byrd, Archie Shepp, another Philadelphia, Art Blakey, Norman Connors, Sister Sledge, Billy Paul, another Philadelphia, Stephanie Mills, George Howard, and the Four Tops. Alfie also toured extensively with the late legendary superstar Teddy Pendergrass, which is where he really got to know Sam Reed. So that's why Alfie's with us tonight. Lastly, Jack McCarthy, who will be the interview this evening, is a longtime Philadelphia area archivist and historian who has held leadership positions at several area historical organizations and has directed a number of major archives and public history projects, including for the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Mann Music Center, the Clef Club, and the Philadelphia Jazz Legacy Project, which he's working with me on. And I'm glad he's here tonight. Jack is currently writing a book on Sam Reed, and I just can't wait to hear all of the questions that Jack's going to ask and all the answers that Alfie and Tootie are going to be supplying for all the people hungry to know all about Sam Reed. So welcome to all of you. Let's go.
Well, all right. Thank you, Suzanne. I'll just give a quick recap of Sam Reed's career before we start some conversation. But let me just say I'm really honored to be here with these two distinguished gentlemen of Philadelphia music. So Sam Reed was a longtime saxophonist and band leader in the Philadelphia area. He was born in South Carolina. He moved up to Philadelphia at 5 or 6 years old, started going to elementary school where he met Tootie, one of our guests tonight, and was active in the jazz scene in Philly, that really hotbed jazz scene in South Philadelphia in the 40s and 50s. He was gigging all around. And then in 1957, well, actually prior to that, he had a long gig at at the Club Harlem in Atlantic City, the famous club in down the shore. And then in 1957, he began playing in the band at the Uptown Theater, just as a band member. But then when Georgie Woods started producing all those legendary shows there. And then in 1963, he was appointed the band leader there at the Uptown, and he was the band leader. Actually, he was the union steward and then the band leader, but up through 1971. And that was really the heyday of the Uptown Theater, when all the great stars, the Motown stars and James Brown and just all the great R&B and soul artists were playing there. Sam was the band leader and working closely with with all those folks. Then he left Philadelphia and went out to California. But before that, he was the horn contractor and saxophonist for the early years of Philadelphia International Records, in the very early years of Philadelphia Soul in the late 60s and early 70s. And so as Gamble and Huff were gearing up their sort of operation, Sam was the guy who contracted all the horn players and also played on a lot of those songs. And the last song he played on and contracted the horns for before he left for California was Billy Paul's Me and Mrs. Jones, which was a mega hit. And Billy Paul, Sam told me that Billy Paul asked him to lead his band as Billy Paul was going out on tour in support of that song, but Sam had already made plans to go to California. So he did that, was out there for a number of years. And then Teddy Pendergrass, who was singing with Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, went out on his own and arranged for Sam. Sam eventually became Teddy's band leader, and that's where Alfie Pollitt played with him for a number of years. And so Sam was Teddy's band leader up until Teddy's tragic accident in 1982 that kind of put an end to all that. And then Sam just became a gigging musician around town for the rest of his life. But he had just this amazingly rich and varied career, mostly based in Philly, in some other places as well, as we'll hear about tonight. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of Sam. I myself, he asked me, it's going about 7 or 8 years ago now, to help him write his autobiography, which I was working with him on, and I got so busy with other things that I really couldn't devote time to it. And I kept saying, I got to get to that, I got to get to that. And then tragically, he died last summer, and it's one of the great regrets of my life that I didn't finish that book while he was alive, but I am going to finish it. I got a lot of material. So anyway, having said all that, we're going to start to talk to, you don't want to hear me talking all night. We're going to talk to our distinguished guests. And Lex, would you play the first clip? Tootie, we're going to hear and see Sam reminiscing about his early days playing with you for a few minutes. And then we're going to ask you to comment and maybe tell us some stories. So Lex, can you?
Our first gigs was basically at the Women's Y on Catherine Street, around 16th and Catherine. There was a little room on the side there as you walk in the door, and they had a piano, and we would set the band up there. It was Ted Curson, Albert Tootie Heath, Jimmy Garrison, or sometimes Henry Grimes would sub to, and Bobby Timmons or Bobby Green, who also played piano. And we would play the jazz tunes that Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, and Dexter Gordon, Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, and of course, Charlie Parker. We would play the tunes because that was what we would be listening to at the Heath's house, which was Tootie Heath. His brother were well-known musicians. So they had all the bebop records at that time.
What year is this we talking about?
This is like the late 40s, early 50s, like 48, 49, 50, around in there.
So you would have been 13, 14, 15?
Yeah, well, let me see. I just graduated from elementary school, the Smith School, and that's where I met Tootie Heath and Ted Curson, and actually we met Henry Grimes and Garrison later on, but we still played together, at that time. Let me see. I'm trying to think who was basically playing the bass at that time while we were in junior high school. Probably Henry Grimes, because he lived in the neighborhood,
So all these guys were South Philly guys.
All these guys were South Philly. We hadn't ventured out at all. We were all in South Philly. And, excuse me, we were doing little dances, little places around in the area. There was several clubs in that area around 20th and Federal. There was a club called the Esquire, and then there was another club called the West Indian Club, and they would have entertainment on the weekends. So it was a lot of music in that whole area around there. So that's how we basically we couldn't escape it, because it was music everywhere, And then with the Heath brothers, I'm in their house, and Jimmy walking around practicing with his alto or whatever. Percy sometime would be home and he'd pray, be practicing. So it was just inevitable that we become musicians.
Love that.
So Tootie, do
Yeah,
you have any memories of that?
I do. But Sam forgot one thing, that left one thing out. But when he was 5 years old, he came from South Carolina to Philadelphia. And that's when he and I were in the kindergarten together at little guys at 5 years old. I think Sam kind of forgot that. He didn't mention that. He mentioned high school, but we went all the way through school together.
Right. Yeah, well, we only used part of, it's a much longer interview, and we had to cut it just for time. So yeah. But what are your memories of when you first started playing with him and your band?
Well, with Sam, like he mentioned, Bobby Timmons, who was the piano player in our band. Ted Curson was the trumpet player. And sometimes Henry Grimes was the bass player. And sometimes it was Jimmy Garrison, who came from Florida later in our lives. And when he came to Philadelphia, he kind of took Henry Grimes' place, because Henry Grimes went on to New York to become Sonny Rollins is bass player. So we had Jimmy Garrison with us. And you have another question?
Well, I was just going to say, all these guys that you just named are like jazz giants, and they're all coming from the same little neighborhood. What was in the water there? What was going on?
Yeah, we came from South Philly together, and there was the water was the horse trough on Point Breeze Avenue. Stop and water the horses that were selling, the hucksters that used to sell fruit and ice in our neighborhoods with the horse and wagons. And they had these things that looked like bowls, which were the water would be running constantly. And that's the water we drank.
That must have been the secret.
That was the secret, yeah. And then all of those guys that I named, well, except Henry Grimes was not from South Philadelphia, but Jimmy Garrison came in from Florida, and he moved in North Philadelphia, but he used to be down in South Philadelphia with us. And Lee Morgan was another guy that lived up in North Philadelphia. Lee Morgan and a bass player named Spanky DeBress. They all lived in North Philadelphia. A drummer named Lex Humphreys, who ended up playing with Sun Ra and being Sun Ra's supportive drummer for a long time. And I learned a lot from Lex because we had the same teacher, which was Ellis Tolan up on Walnut Street. And we used to be playing, and Philly Joe would come through there and play, and we would learn stuff from him as well. But I had two drummers that taught me a lot. Was Specs Wright. They called him Specs because he could read anything on a piece of paper, music-wise, and because we called him Specs because he could read the little dots and everything that was on the paper. And his name was Specs. Charles Wright was his name, and he was my teacher for a long time.
Right. Now, he was the drummer in your brother Jimmy's big band that used to rehearse at your house. You want to talk about that?
Rehearsed in my mother's house here in the dining room, and I used to see all these guys rehearsing, and I became inspired because of Specs Wright and watching him play. And he had just come out of the military, and he was also, let's see, there was a drummer named Teddy Stewart that was with Dizzy's band at the time. And Teddy was not able to make the concerts for some reason. I don't remember why, but I think Teddy was ill or something. But anyhow, Specs Wright took his place, and he went to, and my brother told Dizzy that he had a drummer that would come in and play in the band and could read really good, read the book like it was nothing. And Specs came in and did that, of course. He came in and sat down in a rehearsal and read through the whole book like it was nothing. And Dizzy hired him at the time. So he ended up in Dizzy's band. And then also, after Dizzy's band, he ended up with a trio with Ray Bryant, and him and Ray Bryant and a guy named, I'm trying to think of his name, the bass player was with Ray Bryant. He lived in North Philadelphia, but I can't think of his name at the moment.
Harper? What's
Arthur
the
Harper? Arthur
No,
Harper?
No, this guy was much older than
Oh, okay.
Harper. Harper was just a little baby. But he came along later. But this guy, Rayfield and Specs Wright, and God, I can't think of his name now.
Okay.
But anyhow, it'll come to me later.
So, but your brother Jimmy had his own big band that used to rehearse in your parents' house, and used to clear out the furniture, and the whole neighborhood would be
That's
there.
correct.
You want to talk about that?
The band used to rehearse in the dining room. Jimmy would lay out all the parts on the dining room table, and the guys would stand around the dining room table and play their parts, the horn players, and Specs would be the drummer. So yeah, that's what was my major influence, was my brother Jimmy. I learned more about music with him than anybody else.
Yeah, and Jimmy gave Sam some lessons also, right?
Yeah, he did, but Sam was a newcomer. Sam was like a young guy. Like I said, Sam was 5 years old when he came to Philadelphia, until he and I used to be in the kindergarten together. And then we went to high school together, junior high school. and we used to come home from school after school, and I would always want to go by Sam's house because his mother made the biggest, wonderful coconut cakes you could ever eat. And I would always ask Sam to cut the cake, and then he would get in trouble with his mom from cutting one of the cake, and then I would eat it. And man, it was the greatest. I can remember it now. His mom used to make the best coconut cakes you ever had.
Must
And
have
they
been
were
a Southern recipe.
high. They were a mile high, you know. It looked like it was at least 4 or 5 inches tall. But Sam would cut the cake, but he would get in trouble with his mom for cutting it, but he would give it to me. I don't even remember Sam eating the cake. He would cut it and give it to me, and I would take it and eat it. Anyhow.
Jack, can I ask a question?
Sure, jump in.
Tootie, what did you, since you and Sam were friends for so long, what was it that kept you friends so long? What was it about him that you liked so much?
Sam was a wonderful young man. And, up until he died, which was a few months ago, he would call me and I would call him, and we would talk about being teenagers growing up in South Philadelphia together. And we would laugh about a lot of things. It was him and Ted Curson and myself, and we would all play in a group together. We had our own music and we had so much fun together. And there was a place called the West Indian Club, which was further down South Philly on Federal Street. And they would allow us to play down there at night on the weekends. And people would give us like $1, $2, quarters and whatever. We would play for whatever we could earn at that time. And that was a club called the West Indian Club. Now, that was one of the things that kept me with Sam, is the music. Sam was a great saxophone player, actually, he was. And he was, I think Sam was one of the best musicians in our group. And Sam was always the leader of the group. And I was just in it, and Jimmy Garrison was in it on bass, of course, and Ted Curson. Now, this picture with this guy, Buzzy Wilson, standing up there with an alto. Now, we wouldn't let Buzzy in our band because he couldn't play as well as Sam. He saw the picture and he jumped in the picture.
Lex, why don't you play that video, because you're, Tootie, you perfectly set up the next video clip where Sam is talking about the West Indian Club and showing that picture.
Is he?
So,
We got to see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is Ted Curson, of course, the famous Ted Curson. He used to play a lot in Europe. Like he would be like 6 months in the United States, 6 months in Europe and Finland, I think mainly that's where he would go. And this is Tootie Heath on the drums. This signature on his bass drum was placed there because we played at the Royal Theater on South Street. And they had the Priest and Taylor's Kiddies Hour on Sundays. I think it was from 11 to 12 or 12 to 1. It was just an hour show where everybody would come up and we played on. So what he did, he painted Dizzy Gillespie's face, the bebop, on his bass drum. They called us the bebop trio. It was just 3 of us, just sax, trumpet, and drums, and we would get up there and play what we thought was bebop. So what we were playing, actually, the tune, Charlie Parker's tune, Now Is the Time, it's the same tune as Do the Huckabuck. Right. If you da 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 da, and what we would do, we weren't paying close attention. Now later on, we found out that we were playing Do the Huckabuck because we would play the intro da 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 da, but that's on Do the Huckabuck. Charlie Parker's just do 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 do. It's a blue do 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 do. That type of thing. So we were making a little mistake, but we were famous. We were red hot. They were broadcast on WHAT back in those days.
You got broadcast?
Yeah.
The
Kiddies Hour, yeah, was broadcast. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Like I said, it was either from 11 to 12 or 12 to 1. I forgot exactly which time it was. So when we came out, we had my cousin. He would pick us up in his car. We were big time. The bebop trio.
Tootie, you remember the bebop trio?
Absolutely. My first group I was in was the Bebop Trio. That was my first group ever. And we played one time on the Kitty Hour. I'll never forget it. And we lost because of this guy who sang with the song you just mentioned.
The Hucklebuck.
No, the other one, Billy Paul.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
that song was from
He
the
was on the
70s.
Kitty Hour and he won, and we lost that day, that Sunday,
Oh,
because we played whatever we played, and it didn't go over as well as Billy Paul was singing about him and Mrs. Jones. It went over real big, you know. So he won that day, that Sunday, that Saturday night, I think it was.
okay. Well, I think that was a different contest because the Me and Mrs. Jones came out years later, but he probably beat you in another. But
He
there was a
sang
lot of
something.
great.
He sang something. I forgot what it was, but he won anyhow.
Okay, there was a lot of big talent that came out of that Kitty Hour. At
Yeah,
the
we
Royal
didn't
Theater.
win though because the singing groups outdid us. We had a instrumental group, and that was not that important. Trumpet,
Right.
drums, and alto. That was our
Right.
group. We didn't have a bass player or piano player on the Kitty Hour. It was just the three of us. And later on in life, like Sam mentioned, that Ted Curson was traveling around the world playing with people, especially in Finland. I think he became real popular in Finland. And me and Sam was still around Philly without him. And he became, very successful in another country. But they really liked Ted Curson in Finland.
Right.
And anyhow, me and Sam stayed around Philadelphia and played without him. And we had Bobby Timmons on piano. And then we got a bass player named Henry Grimes, who had a twin brother named Leon. And Leon played the tenor saxophone and Henry played the bass. And these guys were twins, but they didn't really look alike, but they were born, the same time. But anyhow, the Grimes brothers we used to play with the Grimes brothers, but Leon was not in our group, but he played the saxophone. So Sam was the saxophone player. And, I was the drummer, and his brother was Henry Grimes, was the bass player, who became famous after us. He went to New York and played with Sonny Rollins.
Right.
Tootie, can
And
I
you said-
ask you, Jack, can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Yeah.
What other songs did the Bebop Trio do besides
Do the Hucklebuck. You know
yeah,
what,
do the Hucklebuck?
Suzanne? I don't remember, but we played something that Dizzy was playing. Dizzy and Charlie Parker were playing something. Whatever they played, we tried to copy it. But I have no idea what it was, the titles. Sam probably would remember all of that.
Now were you listening to the records? Is that what you were listening
Yes,
to?
we listened to the recordings. And Charlie Parker came to Philadelphia and borrowed my brother's saxophone to play somewhere up in a nightclub. And my brother would go every night and get his horn back because Charlie Parker had the reputation for not getting the horns back after he, because he really had a serious drug problem and alcohol problem too. So when he came to Philadelphia one time, I remember him asking me to take him to the liquor store, which was on Point Breeze Avenue. And I walked with him through the neighborhood, and I was trying to let people know that I was walking with Charlie Parker, and nobody was on the street. Nobody who recognized him. So I ended up taking him to the liquor store, and he used to drink scotch and milk. Was his drink. Isn't that awful? Scotch and
And Sam used to carry his saxophone around, he said, whenever he
probably
could. Right?
did, yeah. Because when he came to Philadelphia, he borrowed the horn. He borrowed my brother's horn, and my brother would get the horn at night and be down in the basement. He said, "Let me see if Charlie Parker left something on this horn that I could play," And he said, "It always sound the same, the horn." He said, "And you never got nothing from that."
And you said that Sam was the leader of your little band, right? Was he? Because he told me he was the one that was listening to the tunes on the record and copying them out and giving everybody their parts. And
I think we were all doing that, but Sam was kind of getting our jobs to play in places,
right.
which like the West Indian Club, the Lincoln Post across the street, and from my parents' house on Federal Street is still there, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still there. The Lincoln Post is still there. And it used to be a parade that used to come out of there on Sundays. Yeah.
Right. All right, so I think we'll switch over now. We're going to come back to you, Tootie, but I want to give Alfie a chance here.
Please do. Please do.
All right. Well, Lex, do you want to play the next clip, which is Sam talks about how he came to lead Teddy Pendergrass's band, and this is where Alfie played with Sam and Teddy for, I don't know, 7 years or so. So,
Well, I was living in California, and Teddy got a job at a famous club out there in Los Angeles, North by Northwest, I think it was called. And so he knew I was out there, so he asked, at that time, I think that his band leader was Dennis Dozier, was his band leader, his guitar player, very fine guitar player. So they got in touch with me and asked me did I want to make the weekend. I think he was there like Thursday through Sunday or something like that. So I said, sure. So after I made that gig, then he started working different places where everybody was with him then. The Blue Notes and the girl, Sharon Page was with him. And we started working in Saginaw, Michigan. And he would send me a plane ticket to go to Saginaw and make the gig, and I'll go back to California. And then we he was supposed to be in California, but he didn't show. That's when he was making his album. But he was already booked for that, so the Blue Notes made the show in California at the Coliseum. Then we went from there to Monterey. We did a show in Monterey, the Blue Notes. It was a show we did a week in Monterey.
Is this Harold Melvin?
No, not Harold Melvin, just the Blue Notes.
The Blue Notes.
Yeah, this was the Blue Notes. Sharon Page all left Harold Melvin and went with Teddy.
Right.
But Teddy left them and made his album by himself. So the Blue Notes was still working because they were all booked. And I guess the guys accepted the fact that Teddy wasn't with them, so the Blue Notes was still there. Excuse me. And so we did Monterey, and then we went to Oakland. Now the next gig was in Boston. So there's no way that we could get to Boston from Oakland, California in time to make that Friday gigs. So what they did, they took the money and flew us across country to Boston. So we did the Boston gig. So when the Boston gig was over, we said, where's our money? He said, well, you have to wait a while. So in the meantime, I had contacted this friend of mine in California, this young lady, and she told me about some friends of hers that was going to open up a dance hall in Kansas City, Missouri. So she said, you can come out and talk to them if you want. And they sponsored my flight out there to talk to them because they really wanted the band. I had the whole band, the whole Teddy Pendergrass band.
So you had taken over as leader at this point?
Well, basically at that point, yeah. So therefore, when I went to Kansas City, and I talked to the guys, and they said, well, we'll fly. They flew the whole band in, so we stayed there for almost a year. This was like January. We stayed there until September, Labor Day weekend, when Teddy called us. He had finished his album, and he called us. He said, would you come in the same band, come and work with us at Club Harlem in Atlantic City.
So what year is this that you were there?
76. Couldn't ask for better circumstances.
And you're living large now.
Oh yeah, now I'm really doing this, but it's not my bebop, not my jazz, but it's a gig, and we had fun. The band, we would play different tunes.
so Alfie, you were part of that band, right? With Sam in Kansas
yeah.
City, with Teddy. Your memories of that?
Yeah, well, Sam was saying, he had Teddy's band, but we had a lead singer. The guy was singing Teddy's part. I think his name was Big John, and he was a real strong singer. in fact, there were a lot of people that we've encountered over time, people singing in the Teddy Pendergrass type of a mode and that kind of persona. So this guy was, lead, and then went to Kansas City, and we were playing at a club called Harlow's in the River Key area of Kansas City, and we played for a hypnotist, this guy named Pagnol, and he had a partner named Emas, and Emas was a herbalist. It was like a variety type thing, and like the big feature of each evening was also while we were there, Sam and us, we developed some of the local talents and feature them, background things. We do some Earth, Wind and Fire stuff and what have you. So the big production was we play the Windmills of my mind, and we play that, and then this guy would actually really for real hypnotize people. It was unbelievable, and so we stayed there for a while, and then things kind of dried up and came back to Philly. I came back personally. I was evicted from my spot in Philly. So I get back, and I get in touch with Teddy, and Teddy hires Sam and the drummer, James Carter, and myself back from the old band. Everybody else was new. Everybody else, would audition and what have you. And, this is during the time when Teddy's first album, Teddy Pendergrass, came out, solo album on Philly International Records.
So you guys didn't play on the album, but you were like his touring band, right?
We didn't play on that album. We played on 2 albums. We played on an album called Teddy Live Coast to Coast.
Right.
It was a two record set. It went platinum, and it was all the live stuff. It was live and studio recordings, cuts, performances. We played on all the live stuff. Live stuff was at the Wick Theater in LA, and it's called the Merriam now, but the Schubert Theater used to be the Schubert Theater in Philly. And there were some interviews, portions where Mimi from WDAS, she was a disc jockey, she was interviewing Teddy and what have you. Also, we played on an album called This One's For You. That was a title cut. The title cut was called The Barry Manilow, This One's For You. And actually, from my perspective, Sam and Teddy produced that album because we learned the song and then treated it, fine-tuned it the way that they wanted to do it, especially like Teddy, And then so he hired they had MFSB horns and strings, but it was augmented with our horn section. It was our background singers did all. It wasn't the Sweethearts of Sigma. It wasn't Yvette and Carla and all them, and Barbara, but it was our ladies. It was a whole. So that was great. They were all able to be on the album. The album came out after Teddy's automobile injury.
Oh, okay.
That's an album that did not go platinum.
Right. Okay. So what was Sam like to work with as a band leader?
Well, Sam, Sam and I, we were the two elders. Sam's maybe about 5 years older than me. So even the road manager was younger than us. And of course, Teddy was and everybody else. So we, and we were, so-called jazz, we would play, we would go places like we were on the road and sit in places, or go hear people play and what have you. And because a lot of the musicians that were with us, didn't come through that school. They came through the straight up R&B. They learned R&B. So we, had a lot of fun. I remember one time we were doing a show in, might have been Nashville, and Teddy was late getting there. He was coming from someplace else in an airplane. So it's getting later and later, time for us to go on. The opening act went on. I think there's a lady that had a song called "You Can Ring My Bell," and she was like a one-hit wonder, so to speak. But it was a great song. So getting closer and closer to the time. So Hank, the road manager, said, "Look, Sam, I want you and the band to go out there." We had our tuxedos on. We went out holding this horn. We went out on the stage, And Sam, said, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pendergrass is not here yet, and he will be here shortly. And, we didn't get, maybe we got a few boos, but, they didn't beat us up or throw us off the stage. And Teddy eventually did, arrive, and a swell time was had by all.
So, as Sam, that one comment Sam made at the end, he played at the Uptown. He was Teddy's band leader, but his heart was in jazz. His heart was in bebop.
Yeah.
And he did all that other stuff, because it was lucrative and all. But he really wanted to play jazz, and I think that's you're saying that that's something that you shared with him, right? You
Yes.
guys were jazz heads.
Yeah. Well, in fact, when we came back to Philly some years later, we started a group called the Elements of Jazz, and it was Richard Adderley, who was Cannonball Adderley's cousin, played vibes. Eddie Harris, who's the Philadelphia Eddie Harris bass player on bass. Alan Nelson on drums from Camden, and Sam on saxophones, and myself on piano. We did an album, and we covered a number of tunes like the Chess Players. We did Backstage Sally. We did Una Mas. In fact, Richard overdubbed congas. He was a conga player too, so we overdubbed that as well as playing vibes and vibes holding it down. So we, but we've done so many gigs, we did one time for when Kenny Gamble was one of the first housing places that he opened, new housing in South Philly. We played for the grand opening of that, and together, and it was really great.
Yeah. So any memorable concerts with Teddy Pendergrass, ones that just really stand out?
Yeah. One of the last concert we did in London, it was like two shows. It was one show I think it was called at the Victoria Theatre in London. And so we did one show, and in between the shows, I had one of the bodyguards said, "This lady's here to see you, Nina Simone," because I had blessed to meet Nina, and we was friends. She was there, so they let her come in as my guest, and then then after the show, we went back, and then during the break, we was in the dressing room. I should have known something was up because it was Stevie Wonder's percussionist, his bass player, and his drummer were hobnobbing with the guys, the band, because they knew some of each other, And then so the last song we did, which was called "Take Me in Your Arms Tonight," I think it was written by either Antume or Dexter Wansell, and it was Stephanie Mills and Teddy. So the song, Sam counted the song off, and then so I'm playing a grand piano, and I'm playing a Rhodes electric piano. So song starting, and so the roadies, the road crew, took the Rhodes piano, put it up near the front of the stage, put a mic in front of it, brought Stevie Wonder out, sat him down in front of the Rhodes, and we played the gig.
Wow. Stevie Wonder.
Boy, and hey, Tootie, he did a solo. Man, he sound like Herbie on this tune, man, on the Rhodes.
Do you remember
Can
what
I
song?
ask-
It definitely is a wonder.
Jack, can I ask you a question of Alfie? Alfie, what was, all those times you did long gigs with Sam, what was he like as a musician, as a leader? I mean, sometimes it can be really, if you have working with with musicians can be either really pleasant, really creative, or really horrible. What kind of a man was he? What kind of a musician was he working with?
Well, I say Sam and Teddy, they were about business and ran a tight ship, And so Sam made sure that our union cars are paid up and everything, and we're dressed properly and playing the music right. If we played the wrong stuff, we get fined. And be where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be there, on the bus or on the plane or, all that kind of stuff. It was unlike when I first got with the so-called Philly Sound R&B people. I was working with Major Harris, and it was like the musicians were so lax.
Oh,
They were used to the management would tell the horn players that the band to be there such and such a time, which would actually be 3 hours before the time they're supposed to be there. To give them enough wiggle room time. They know they're going to be there at least by that time. That was like, the Petty ran a tight ship, really tight ship, and
Right. And that was Sam's job to keep that all in line?
Yeah. Hank, the road manager, Henry Evans. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right.
all right.
So,
Well, I want to give a heads up to you, Jack, that we've got 5 minutes left before we go to Q&A, and I see some old friends sitting out there waiting with questions. So
all right. Well, we have one more clip that I want to Lex to play, and it kind of circles back to Tootie a bit, but it's just kind of Sam sort of summing things up a little bit. So Lex, can you play that next clip? Last clip? Oh, that's right. It's about, yeah.
Oh, John, well, like I said, he and Jimmy, they were real close because I remember John when he was playing alto in the Dizzy Gillespie's band. Tootie and I used to hook his school to go see, and they used to be at the Earl Theater, 11th and Market. It was Jimmy on first alto, John, Paul Gonzalez, Big Nick, and Cecil Payne with the saxophones and
Wow.
his band. And Tootie and I, well, like I said, Tootie and I, we did just about everything we could think of. We'd go to John's house, and then with Jimmy, of course, he would take us around to the different rehearsals that the different people would have. And Jimmy Oliver, he and Jimmy Oliver had a battle of sax one time out in West Philly. He would take us there, Reds Garlands, and all the musicians, like I said, the Heath brothers was #1 as far as Philadelphia, and everybody loved them, and they loved everybody, and it was just, and I just happened to be there, the experiences through all that,
So Tootie, that's your friend, of how many years? 80 years or?
At least 80 years, yes. Yeah. Sam and I go way back to little boys together. So, right. When I decided to leave Philadelphia, I thought Sam was going to leave Philadelphia as well, but he didn't. He didn't leave. He stayed there and created this wonderful legacy that he's left there in Philadelphia. And I was there, a part of that. I was gone away. I was away doing other things.
Right. Yeah, he told me about the apartment that like you and Lee Morgan and a bunch of guys got, and he almost went in on it for a time.
Well, we had an apartment in New York, me and Lee Morgan, Bobby Timmons. They were all with Art Blakey at the time. And well, when they went out of town one time, we were on 5th Street down on the Lower East Side. And they went out of town one time with Art Blakey, and they left the doors wide open on the apartment. And that's when I said, it's time for me to move out of there, because you guys are irresponsible. They just left the whole apartment open and left and went out of town.
Tootie, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Jack?
Sure, yeah.
Tootie, what do you miss most about Sam? Because I'm watching these clips and I want to tell everybody that these clips.
I miss being able to call him and talk to him about our days as teenagers. He's the only person I know left that I could talk to. One other friend of ours that just died a couple of weeks ago was around, a guy named Billy Bonner. He was around, but he didn't play anything, but he was around with us during that time as young men. And South Philadelphia was quite an interesting I would do it all over again if I could.
It sounds so,
Magical.
yeah, it does. That's a good word,
Yeah,
magical.
we had a great time. Sam and Ted Curson, but Ted Curson kind of left us real early and became another person. He got married really early, and he married a woman named Margie, and him and Margie moved away to somewhere in Jersey somewhere, and he moved away from us, so we kind of lost our trumpet player. So Lee Morgan kind of slipped in there, and we had Lee Morgan with us for a while. But this guy was so young, he couldn't even be in the clubs. He was like 13 or 12, and we were playing in clubs, and he couldn't be in there because he was too young.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he finally grew up a little more.
And
That's
you
right.
remember going to Music City, for the jam sessions at Music City?
Yeah, I do remember. It was one night a week, and that's when I saw Philly Joe. The first time I ever saw Philly Joe Jones,
Right.
Louis Belson. I saw some wonderful drummers because this guy this guy that was my teacher, Ellis Tolan.
Mhm.
He was teaching a lot of people, to play, and he was quite a drummer himself, and he was teaching people, and he used to have these jam sessions once a week. And that's when I saw Philly Joe the first time. He came in up there and played. And I said, oh man, that's what I want to do.
All right, now we've got, hold on a second, Jack. We've got some questions,
Yeah, let's
okay?
go to questions. Yeah.
All right, hold on, guys. All right, let me see. Well, first of all, we have someone named Mitchell Collier who said, let me see if Charlie Parker left something on his horn. He loved that quote that you that you mentioned, Tootie. So I agree with him. That's a great quote. Now here we have, does Tootie have any memories of Hassan Ibn Ali that he can recount? Do you remember Hassan?
I do, and I loved him because of his being so what they call them nowadays avant-garde. He was so different from all the piano players. But his name was Count Langford was his name. William
That's right.
Langford ended up becoming Hassan, and he used to come and sit in the clubs around, and and he would play some of the loudest piano you ever heard. Yes, I do remember him.
Yeah, I heard we did a one of these Philly Jazz Talks about, they just found his recordings that he made with Odine Pope and for Atlantic Records. They thought they had been burned in a fire and they just released them. And wow.
Let me tell you this. Him and my brother Jimmy were in federal prison together. Because they both, Jimmy had a drug problem and he was arrested in Philadelphia. They put him in a federal prison, and Hassan was in there already for something. I don't know what for, but he was in the band with Jimmy. Jimmy started a band in the prison. They had never had any music, and they allowed him to start a band. So he started the band, and Hassan was the piano player. And Jimmy said, after about a couple of weeks, Hassan wrote him a long letter and said he didn't want to be in the band any longer. And Jimmy said he acted like he was going somewhere, and they were both in prison. They both had long sentences, and they were both sitting in prison.
Oh,
Jimmy said he got a notice from Hassan saying, I'm sorry, man. I don't want to be in the band any longer. And Jimmy said he acted like he was going somewhere. And Jimmy said he saw him every day in jail.
We kind of resigned, huh?
Yeah, William Langford, he quit the band. But Jimmy said neither one of them was going anywhere. They were both locked up in jail. He didn't want to be in the band anymore. Did you ever hear Hassan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like
William
Suzanne said, there's an album out now.
Langford, yeah, William Langford, and he changed his name to Hassan.
That's right. All right, we have another question for Tootie. It says, does Tootie recall having any rival bands in Philly? How about Charlie Holmes and the Jolly Rompers?
I don't remember that band at all.
Okay.
But I tell you what, I went to Atlantic City with Sam with the Traineers. You know, the Traineers, there used to be a singing group called the Traineers.
Right.
Okay.
They were in this Club Harlem in Atlantic City for the whole summer. And Sam went down there to play with them. And Sam got me the gig to play the drums with them. So I played with them for quite a few months in Atlantic City with Sam. And we were both in the band down there. And I remember Sammy Davis coming down there one night, and his mother his mother owned the bar across the street from the Club Harlem. And
Okay.
Sammy would be in the bar, man, and Sammy was huge, you know. We said, damn, man, it's Sammy Davis, you know, and his mom I think his mom owned the bar across the street, and he would come and visit her.
Right. Was that the band that Johnny Lynch led?
Well, Johnny Lynch was in a band with my brothers, but we were not with the Traineers. Sam was the band leader in the Traineers. They were a singing group. They were a singing group, and Sam had the band, the bass, and I forgot who played the bass with us.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yes, I
Now
know
we've got
ahead.
4 minutes left, and I want to thank both Tootie and Alfie for being such wonderful guests. And I hope that we can talk to both of you again for a subsequent show later on. If you'd like, I would love to, you know, an hour doesn't seem long enough. So, but, you know,
Nice to
thank
meet
you.
you, Alfie. I said, Alfie, it's nice to have met you, man.
The pleasure is mine.
I'm sorry I missed you in Philly. I'm sorry I missed you, but I can't be with everybody. You know how it is.
Oh yeah, yeah, you know.
Well, you're both very important to Philadelphia and Philadelphia music and Philadelphia jazz. And I do want to
Suzanne,
put up.
let me say
Oh.
one thing before you close.
Okay, I wanted to put up some. Okay.
The Tootie and Alfie, well, it probably relates. What the project that we're doing, Suzanne and I, is creating a Philadelphia jazz archives, and it's going to live at at Temple University at the Bloxon collection. So both of you, if you want a place for your memorabilia, Tootie, I'm looking at all those concert posters and photos behind you and all that. Both of you, if you want to preserve your archives, all your personal photos and mementos, we have a place. Sam's archives are there, and many other people's are there. Grover Washington's are there, and so and anybody else listening, we want materials for documenting Philadelphia jazz history. So if your personal collections, if you're looking for an appropriate place to preserve them forever, we have it, and they'll be in good company.
But let me tell you about a guy named Clarence Sharp. And his name was
yeah, C
C
sharp.
sharp.
C Sharp. And we never called him Clarence, but his name was C Sharp. And this is another Philadelphia guy, Clarence, Bobby Timmons, and Lee Morgan. They should all be in there. Spanky
That's
D
right.
should be in there. McCoy Tyner should be in there as well. Red Garland, John Coltrane. They all lived in Philadelphia.
That's
So
right.
all be in there.
Well, they're all going to live at the Bloxon collection once we get everything together. This is what we did tonight was a part of it.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's important to preserve all of this history because it's so very much important. It's so important. Anyway, let's go to the URLs, Lex. All right, here's some important URLs so you really get to know Mr. Heath. His Wikipedia article is the best thing about him. You can see every single record, and it's like as long as my entire arm. every recording he's done, who he's played with, everything. So go there and in fact, everybody who's registered for this Philly Jazz Talks About, I will resend this to you so you don't have to get a pen out and start writing it down. Also, Alfie Pollitt has a lovely bio there at the unitycommunity.com. So you can go there and check out what Alfie's been doing. Lastly, our phillyjazzhistory.org is a place where you can go check out our YouTube videos. You can check out what we're doing. You can check out everything that we're doing. And for the listeners tonight or the viewers, if you feel like donating, we'll gladly accept, because your tax-deductible donation will help the community build the Philadelphia Jazz Archives that everyone can enjoy and learn from. And again, it's phillyjazzhistory.org/donate. And I want to thank both Tootie and Alfie and Jack and Lex. Lex is our tech guy. He's a graduate student at Temple. Thank you, Lex.
Thank you. With Lex,
And-
we wouldn't be able to be on if it wasn't for Lex.
That's
Okay.
right. Lex is the guy that keeps it all together. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thanks everybody who came to view. You can also see this edited version on our YouTube channel and on channel 64. Give it a couple of weeks and we'll be on there. And I'd like to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you again.